Do you want to learn how to manage ACLs with Ansible? Watch this. The first task that we're going to execute is a test. This test is just validating that an ACL is implemented to an interface. Test failed because we haven't created any ACLs yet. For our second task, we're going to configure our ACLs on two separate routers. ACLs configured. We're now going to run some show commands to display the configuration. We're going to see two ACLs, one on router 1, extended ACL, and router 2, standard ACL. For our next task, we're going to apply the ACLs to an interface. And now, before we run a show command, we're going to execute our test again. And our test passes. The result saying, hey, extended ACL is applied to Ethernet 1 on router 1, and standard ACL is applied to Ethernet 1 on router 2. We can validate the results by running a show command. So we're going to show ACL interface. This displays the configuration of our interfaces, and it shows that we have standard ACL inbound of router 2, and for router 1, extended ACL inbound. If you want to learn how to build this, I'm going to show you how to do it right now. Welcome to the DevNet Zone. My name is John, and the topic for today is managing ACLs with Ansible. I'm going to show you how to configure ACLs, implement ACLs to interfaces, display ACL configuration, and delete ACL configuration. The blueprint for this video is the Cisco CCNP automation track, and we're focusing on managing configurations with a focus on ACLs. If you want to reference the Ansible documentation, go to this site, and we're going to focus on the ACL interfaces module and ACLs module. This is the lab that I'm going to be executing my code against. ACLs are going to be configured on router 1 and router 2, and we're going to implement the ACLs on Ethernet 1 for both of the routers. Okay, let's look at the Ansible code. We'll start off with the playbook. This is the playbook we're going to be using for our entire video. We're targeting the router group for our hosts. This is our collection, and then the role that we're targeting, the iOS ACL role. This is just some quick instructions on my tag structure for this playbook. Let's look at our role, the iOS ACL role. We have two directories, we have tasks and we have templates. Let's look at our tasks. So we have all of our tasks here, our different types of tasks, and then our main.yaml, which imports all of those tasks to do different things, configure, show, modify, delete, and all that stuff. And we're gonna start with configuring ACLs. So we're gonna look at the ACL configure, and here we have two tasks. Essentially, the task is doing the exact same thing, except this task is configuring ACL on router 1, and this one's configuring ACL on router 2. To start off, we're only going to focus on router 1 because a lot of the times it's very rare that you're going to configure the exact same ACL on two devices for a specific interface. So here, if you see both of our tasks, we have conditions. So if router in device type, so configuring this specifically for a router, and if R1 in inventory hostname. So we're pretty much saying, hey, because this is the hostname of the device, this task is only going to execute against router 1 versus this one is only going to execute against router 2. And this is just two different ways where you can maintain ACLs using this module. So we're going to be using the iOS ACLs module. And then under the configure parameter, we have a couple different things. So we have the AFI type, so IPv4. Then we have the ACLs parameter. ACLs essentially allows you to create a list of dictionaries for each ACL. So here you can see we have one ACL, which is std_ACL. But you can create a second entry under this column, do tag name, and then do standard ACL2, standard ACL3. So you can make ACLs in bulk with this one task under this ACLs parameter. Here, for this specific example, we're just doing one ACL. And under the ACL specific configuration, we have ACL type. This could be standard or extended. And then you have your ACE, so your ACL entries. This is the exact same thing where you're going to have a list of ACL entries for this one specific ACL. Here, we're going to start off with one entry. We're going to configure one, and then we're going to uncomment these different entries to show you different ways where you can configure the ACLs using the iOS ACLs module. And we're going to be using state merged. To initially apply the configuration of the ACL, you want state merged. This is going to apply the ACL configuration. And then if you want to add ACL configuration, merge. If you're maintaining your entire ACL structure with this module, you're going to change state to something else. And I will show you that in a second. So we're going to kick off this task. So we want to configure router 1. Let's start that off. All right, so we executed this tasks on router 1, and we're gonna run a show command to just look at the configuration real quick. All right, we have router 1, we have standard ACL right here with one entry, as you see here. If we're actually going to kick this off again to show you that because there's already a configuration, it's going to return an error. Show you this in a second. Here's our error. It's read, cannot update existing sequence 10 of ACL std underscore ACL with state merge. Please use state replace or overwritten. So you can't continuously use this task repetitively because you can just state merge. What we can do is, if you want to add to this ACL since it's already created, let's create sequence 20. So let's kick this off again. Done not execute. ACEs type class dictionary. Oh, looks like I forgot my actual entry. Let's run it now. Here we go. Let's run a show command. So you can see that we added sequence 20 to it. So let's uncomment all of these. Same thing. Let's kick it off again. It's going to return that same error because we're still in state merged, saying, hey, this already exists. If I do state replaced, I can continue to run this consistently, and I'll get the exact same result because I'm maintaining the state of my config with the ACL, with the module. So there's two different ways you can do this. You can decide to maintain an entire ACL structure, like here, and build your entries as you go, or you can just use this module to just add to current ACLs that you have and not maintain the state here. Here, if we want to add 30, we don't need to change it back to state merged. We can keep it as replaced because remember, we're defining the state. And let's just run a quick show command just to show you that sequence 10 and sequence 20 are there. We uncommented 30. We're keeping state replaced. We don't need to change it back to merged. Okay, let's run a show command again. As you can see, we have sequence 30. Same thing with 40. And then I can actually take away with replaced. Again, we're defining the state right now. So it's saying I want 10, 20, and 40. And whatever is currently there, we're going to replace it. So currently it's 10, 20, 30. And here we have 10, 20, 40. We're going to kick this off. It's pretty much going to say, hey, whatever is here, we're going to replace it. We're going to show command. And now we have 10, 20, and 40. And 30 is gone. And that's how we're able to use this module in two different ways. You know, you can, if you want to maintain entire ACL structures, I know ACLs can get very long with hundreds of entries. So if you're maintaining with this structure, you're going to take up a lot of lines of YAML. But if you like maintaining everything in YAML, you can. Because if you need to go make a change, You submit a change request, you come over here, you create your entry, and state replace, you kick it off, and it's always going to look the way you define it here in YAML. And it's always going to be just like that. Versus if you just want to add something, you can remove all this stuff. Let's say I want to add 30 back, but I don't maintain the state. Just imagine this stuff is all gone. Make it back to merge. See, 30 is not here. I'm running here as merge. Say, hey, I just want to add this entry to my ACL. I'm not defining my state. Let's run this task. And here you go. And then if you want to target, your second router, or you want to configure multiple ACLs at the same time, we just add the router 2 tag. We can execute this against router 2. Router 2 had just 3 entries. Let's run a show command on router 2. And here we go. And then versus router 1, where we added 30, now you have 10, 20, 30, and 40 sequence. And that's how you use the iOS ACLs module to manage or maintain ACLs. All right, so we created our ACLs. Now let's apply an ACL to an interface. I'm going to be using the ACL_mod YAML file, and I have 2 tasks here. I have one task to apply the ACL to an interface, and then I have the second task to remove an ACL from an interface using tags ACL_app, ACL_remove. So what you're going to see here is these tasks are almost identical. So reading the first one, we're using the iOS ACL interfaces module. Under the config parameter, we have the name of our interface. We have the access group parameters, so the AFI. And to look at these variables, let's pull up the host specific variables. We have router 1, we have router 2. Okay, so for router 1, so we are looping ACLs. So this is our ACLs parameter. This is the name. So for the interface first, so item.interface, so Ethernet 01. The AFI type, IPv4. Under the ACLs parameter, so we have name, item.name. Name is std_ACL. And the direction versus is inbound or outbound. Our direction for this one is inbound. Pretty much identical for router 2. And then if you go down to removing the ACL, pretty much the same thing, same parameters. The only difference is the state. So state merge is we're adding to the configuration. State deleted is we're removing from the configuration. And deleted sounds kind of scary. It's not deleting the ACL. This is deleting the config on the interface that applies the ACL to the interface, saying, hey, we're pretty much removing the ACL from this interface. And let's go ahead and run our ACL apply for router 1. So we're going to run mod. As you can see here, mod for ACL mod, and then ACL_app for apply. And we're going to do this for router 1. Okay. Now we're going to run a show command to look at the interface on router 1. Show ACL int. Let's break this big screen. So for router 1, this is Ethernet 1, as you saw in my YAML file. Description to router 2, the IP address, and you can see IP access group, and then the ACL inbound. If I want to remove this ACL, just put ACL_REM for remove. We run our show command again, show ACL int, and then you shouldn't see the ACL here. So here's our interface, and I'll show you real quick, our ACL is still present. and it only removed it from the interface specifically. And we're still, see, as you saw, it was implemented for a couple of seconds, it's already started getting hits. And yeah, and that's how you can use the iOS ACL interfaces module to apply and remove ACLs from interfaces. For the show commands, so this is what my show commands look like when I'm displaying the configuration. This is in the ACL underscore show YAML file, and I have two types of show commands. So I have my show ACL command, which is going to display the configuration of my ACL, and then show ACL interface command, which is just iterating through the ACLs parameter in my YAML file, so ACLs, and it's grabbing the interface from here and displaying the configuration. So tags that you saw earlier, show underscore ACL. I'm using iOS underscore commands, and this is my command, show IP access list, passes that to a variable, and then I use debug to output that to the terminal. Same exact thing for the second one, iOS command module. Here's my command, show run interface, atom.interface, that is right here, and it's going to display that to the terminal. And this is very nice because as you're applying configuration, you can also run this tag just to quickly validate that the changes you made are correct. All right, now let's say you want to remove an interface configuration completely from a device. You can use this task. So to delete the ACL, we're calling tags del for a router type. We're using the iOS underscore ACLs module. As you can see, this is the exact same module we used to create the configuration. So the exact same thing, except you don't need all the extra parameters. You can just run the ACLs parameter, just call the name of the ACL that you want, and state deleted, and it'll just completely remove it. I'll show you that now. So first, we're gonna run a show command for the ACLs configured in router 1. So we have this ACL. Let's change our tags. So we want to run tag del, short for delete. And this tag is not set up anywhere in my variables files, so I'm just going to pass this with the command. So I'm going to specify tag e ACL underscore name equals, and then the name of the ACL. Run that task. Okay, now let's run our show command. Let's see if our ACL is still there, and our ACL is gone. Yeah, so essentially this is just the inverse of what you saw earlier. So this same one, just change the state to merged, and it'll create the ACL, and then state deleted will delete the ACL from the global config. Okay, now I'm going to show you a different way of managing your ACLs. So earlier I showed you how to use the ACL specific modules to configure and manage your ACLs. And now I'm going to show you how to manage them using Jinja templates. And here's what the tasks look like. I added all the tasks from this one file because the tasks are just a lot less. So this first one is to configure ACLs with Jinja. I'm using the iOS underscore config, and I'm calling this template. So essentially, all of my ACL configuration is going to be in this template, and I'll show you that in a second. Then if I want to apply this ACL, I'm going to use this task. And as you can see, I'm using the iOS underscore ACLs module. This is identical that you saw earlier. It's going to loop ACLs. It's going to grab the interface, the name, and the direction. And then the inverse, removing the ACL, the exact same task that you're seeing here, except we're changing the state to deleted. And same for this last one. So to delete the ACL, you saw that earlier, iOS underscore ACLs, you call the name of the ACL. And here I created a variable called delete ACL. That way I can make it dynamic per device. And you can see here we want the ACL that we want and the ACL to delete, two separate variables. And then if ACL's configured as true. So if you just want like a failsafe and you don't want to execute this against multiple devices, you can select false and then it won't run against that device. Let's look at the templates. All right, standard ACL. So here's a standard ACL. So IP access standard ACL, all of my sequence. So I think for a network engineer, like a true network engineer, this is going to be a lot more familiar. This is the raw syntax of your ACL configuration. You can come in here, you can delete and add entries, and then just push the configuration to the device. So the first thing we're going to do is apply this ACL on router 1. So name standard ACL, and this is the router 1 YAML file. We're going to do this with this tag. So for router 1, conf j for Jinja, and then ACL conf. All right. And then we're going to look at the configuration. All right. You can see it's identical to what you see in our file here. And if you want to add entries, let's say I created my ACL and you want to manage your ACLs through this file, sequence 8, change the IP slightly. Let's kick off our configure again. It's just gonna push the file. Let's do a show. And we see sequence 38. The only limitation to this is that there is no replace or overwrite option. So let's say I just add a sequence 38. And I want to, let's say I want to change it. I made a mistake. I want to change sequence 38. Let's go configure it. This most likely is not going to apply. Let's look at 38. And 38 hasn't changed. Same thing if you remove an entry. Say we remove this entry. We're going to apply this. This is not going to work either. So the only thing that's really going to work is if you want to add this configuration initially. See, 38 is still present. There's no overwrite or replace option. So what I recommend is you can make your changes. So let's say we don't want 38 anymore. Make your changes to a new ACL, and then you're just gonna replace these ACLs, right? So let's go and so for router 1, let's say I have a new ACL that I want to replace for this one. This one's gonna have a new name. Let's say latest. I want to apply this ACL. Let's do that now. Now we should see two different ACLs on this device. All right, so you have two ACLs, and then obviously the one we want is latest, and you can delete the one that you don't want. So if we go back to our tasks, we want to delete. So let's run ACL delete. And here we put the older one, and now we want the latest. So this one's going to be removed. Let's run this task. Let's look at our configuration. And as you can see, 38 is gone. Standard ACL latest. Now let's apply our ACL. Let's do ACL apply. Now we're going to look at our interface configuration. And here's our standard ACL latest. Let's say now this ACL is running live. A lot of times, like if you do want to make that change, let's say we want this guy again for some reason. You can replace it while it's still in the interface. You don't have to remove the ACL because then if you remove it and you don't swap it out quickly, there's going to be a gap where that interface is not going to have any kind of ACL access list, with applying its security features. So we're going to create our other one. So let's do entry 38 just so we can define the difference between the two. And we want to create this one for router 1 again. We're going to configure, ACL configure. Let's apply this guy again. Let's look at the configuration. we should see two ACLs now. So we have standard ACL and latest. Latest is currently on the interface. Let's just look at the interface config one more time. Here's latest, but we want standard to be back here again. And instead of removing and adding a new one, we're just gonna do ACL apply again with our new ACL variable here. Let's do that. All right, applied standard ACL. Let's look at our interface configuration. And you can see standard ACLs here now. So the biggest difference is that there isn't like a defining state with this method. You have to maintain, you can add to your ACL, but if you want to modify the current ACL, like remove an entry or modify an ACL entry, you have to create a new ACL, apply it to the device, and then replace it in the interface. But I feel like for network engineers, I feel like a lot of us would like to see the raw configuration of the configuration, save this in a repository, and then whenever you want to modify, you just replace your ACL. Thank you for watching, and if you like what you saw, don't forget to like the video and stay tuned for the next video.